Thank you everyone for coming. And Chris, thank you for hosting such an incredible Missing Middle event once again. I've been a speaker here before. In the past, it was with my role with More Neighbours Toronto, but today I want to talk to you about why Ontario's economy needs the missing middle. Because frankly, it does. But a little bit about me first and why I'm running for the Ontario Liberal Party. I grew up in the GTA. Neither one of my parents went to university, but regardless, they were able to afford a good home and build decent lives. My grandparents were peasant farmers from rural Italy who immigrated here in the 1950s, and they came here and worked hard. Normal jobs, steelwork. My nana was a seamstress. These are roles in our society that once were able to afford a good life. They're not anymore. I grew up and I ended up going to the University of Waterloo to study nanotechnology engineering because I wanted to build things that could change the world. But as I started to see the erosion of quality of life, especially for my generation, the issue of housing became paramount to me. And so that's what led me to establishing and starting More Neighbours Toronto, to advocate for land use, permitting, and tax changes that would help us alleviate our housing crisis. I took that role and became chair of Build Toronto, which was an organization focused on growth-oriented and policy reform that could drive change in our city itself. And now I'm taking that to the provincial level because we have so many challenges in Ontario, but we also have so many opportunities as well. I believe at the end of the day, Ontario can still win. We have everything going for us: talent, land, resources, industry, institutions, all of these things that create a base for our province to lead the 21st century economy. And so the fact that our economy itself hasn't grown on real terms, on a per person basis, in 25 years should astound all of us. And housing is a big part of the reason why things are not working. If you look at real home prices in Ontario relative to incomes, we have seen a complete divergence from what normal people earn in their jobs. And that ends up meaning that hard work no longer buys ownership in our society. And this creates a lot of cynicism among people who no longer believe that many of our systems work for them. And a driving factor behind this is not just the fact that we're not building enough housing, but we're actually not building enough space either. And so if you look at the amount of space that we've built for people from 1970s through into the 2000s, for every incremental person we've added to our province, we're now building about half the amount of space in new housing that we need for them. And that's a big factor behind why housing itself has become so expensive. The culprit in all of this is bad land use, very high taxes, which we are starting to see some progress on, but it's not good enough. Our processes are extraordinarily slow. I believe Altus Group measured that in Toronto it takes 25 months on average to get a building permit. In Denmark, it takes an average of 64 days. That is a total divergence from what good governing practices should allow. We have building codes that have not been updated, despite the fact that we have made so many changes to how we consider land. And this has resulted in a level of dysfunction in our housing system that has caused the price-income ratio in this province to more than double and has truly undermined my generation and the one that's coming after in particular. This cannot continue to go forward. This has resulted in pressing scarcity onto young people in particular, where we are seeing an erosion of the ability for young adults to meet milestones. The time of first home purchase has slipped by more than a decade in just 15 years. We see a decline in marriages. We see a decline in the number of children that people are having. People are not reaching financial stability earlier. They're starting less businesses than they used to. All of these things can be traced back to some of our dysfunction in housing. And I'm not saying that there are not other cultural problems here as well that have resulted in some of these trends too. But housing is an enormous factor in the economic changes that have led to major cultural changes here as well. And the reality is, when we talk about competition in our economy, we need to think about what the growth cycle looks like and how that impacts outcomes. What we want is a productive growth cycle in which labor is able to save and potentially even invest. They want to go spend more in the economy. That creates fertile landscape for new businesses and new products to have a chance at getting ground and growing. That leads to capital formation and greater investment. And that leads to greater competition. And when there's more competition, especially for labor and for skills, people's incomes go up. And that allows them to spend more, and that allows them to save more. That's the growth cycle. But for every dollar that gets siphoned off into unproductive spending, like we do on rents and that we do on interest, well, that's directly undermining our economic performance over the long term. So this absolutely needs to change. So how does missing middle change the path that we're on? What missing middle, which is really everything from a two-unit duplex to a 6-story small apartment. This is what we do not see enough in the landscape in Ontario. But what it allows people to do, especially when we build it in a lot of the right places where the demand is already there, it allows people to live closer to high productivity jobs and allows them to find more employers that can use their skills. And that means that they can bargain for higher wages. It allows our neighborhoods themselves to achieve greater scale so that we can have better infrastructure and services with lower taxes. It allows families to afford bigger space so they can have that next kid. They can spend more, and they can buy more, and they can own more things. And that increases people's material well-being. It allows smaller builders to navigate a process so that they can compete more with the big guys. And that creates competition and consumer surplus in the kinds of housing that people can afford and live in. And it reduces the amount of speculation that is being trapped in redundant lands and others that are created by all the land constraints that we have. And then we can use land better as well. All these things will help Ontario's economy on the path forward. So what needs to change? How do we empower this kind of housing from a policy perspective to enable us to grow our way out of the challenges that we faced? Number one, we do have to upzone more broadly and standardize more policy at the provincial level and to see that applied locally. I'm not going to go into every single one of these details, but I'll give you some additional examples. These are the land use codes in Mississauga and Toronto. In many ways, they're very similar, but they're still extraordinarily unique. And once you go out of the GTA, places like Ottawa have nearly 90 different zoning codes. There's no reason for all these cities to be defining all these things separately. The province should come in and set clear rules around land use and see these designations applied locally. Similarly, when we look at the amount of reporting that needs to be done to build multifamily homes, I'm sure many in this room have experienced this as well. There's a huge fragmentation in the kinds of reports that happen even in similar regions. Mississauga, Brampton, and Caledon all have different reporting standards for building multifamily homes in their jurisdictions. This isn't necessary, and this complexity makes it a lot harder for us to build systems and technology around them that enables faster permitting. So we've got to make sure that the province is taking a role here to say we're going to set standards and allow municipalities to apply them locally. Number two, we have got to modernize our building code here. We need to allow single egress designs. We need to update our fire code. And frankly, we need to allow elevator standards like we see in other countries around the world, like the European elevator standard. This will not only enable more kinds of missing middle housing, but it will result in better unit layouts, and it will result in more beautiful urban landscapes that we can feel proud of to live in as a province. But we can't get there if policy doesn't change, and that's why this is so important. And then finally, we have to shift the tax burden away from the builders and on to the speculators. I would like to see the HST permanently removed on all new units under $1 million. I would like to see development charges on infill housing completely abolished. And I would like to see remove the land transfer tax as well, because it's a tax on mobility and it's a tax on productivity, and we cannot have that. But politicians have been too afraid to say what this means for cities, because a lot of cities themselves are not empowered to build the kind of infrastructure that they need to. And so I think that we need a system that clarifies the roles and gives our cities and makes them whole over the long term. So I'd like to see our cities be given 1% of the HST in perpetuity. This will more than replace the revenue that they're going to lose from development charges. I'd like to make better use of municipal development corporations so we can amortize some of the costs of utilities and infrastructure that they need over increased consumption that development brings. I'd like to see us use instruments like tax increment financing. I'd like to make the property tax system itself more flexible, and yes, we do need to return to annual assessments as well because the system that we've seen has become too skewed. And finally, I'd like to see us upload more responsibility and accountability for municipal health and housing services like shelters, transitional housing, and rehab services, because we need to tie these things into our healthcare system and do them properly at scale. This should alleviate a lot of the burdens our cities are facing in keeping up with their own infrastructure, make them whole through change, and finally, shift the burden of growth onto speculators. So, I'll be coming forward with a 1% land speculation tax on commercial, brownfield, and undesignated greenfield land, so that we can recuperate some of the costs to pay for these changes. And yes, I'll be looking to levy this also on homes over $3 million. In some ways, it becomes a luxury tax, but what we should see is the driving down of land values so that we can enable more projects to go forward at lower prices. Because at the end of the day, being able to afford a good home to live in is a foundation for social prosperity and cultural health. We have to change our system, and we need people like everyone in this room to contribute to building a better economy. So I appreciate what everyone is doing here, and just so you know, if I'm elected, you'll have an ally in me. Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the Missing Middle Summit today. Thank you so much.